so we'll wait 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you for your understanding. So we still have some people coming in, so we wait again 1 minute. Thank you. So I think we will start in order to keep on time. So good morning, everyone. I am Arthur Guichet, Secretary General for the European Water Association. Welcome to today's webinar on the revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, Insight and Q&A. So I see that most of you already found out the chat, so that's already really good. We'll start with a short presentation about EWA, 1 or 2 points from our side about the text, and then we'll move directly to Michel Sponar presentation and then the Q&A sessions. So the European Water Association, who are we and what do we do? We are actually an independent, non-governmental and not-profit organization dealing with the management and improvement of the water environment. We have members from nearly all European member states, and we have 3 categories of members. We have national members representing operators, technicians. We have corporate members that could be involved all along the water cycle. And we have research members, mainly universities, working on water sectors, and same could be on monitoring, grant management, and so on. Due to this wide spectrum of members, we aim to be a platform for discussion on key technical and policy issues in Europe. And we always have so far consensus among all of our members on a position we take. And we are really glad to have this spectrum and to bring everyone around the same table. And I think that's really the added value from EWA. And we also aim to spread the word about the water sectors. And to do so, we arrange conferences, a workshop like today. And I would like to thank you, Michel, for being there today on behalf of the commissions. We always have a strong support from the commission on this. So thank you very much. We also arrange meetings. We have special working group of experts, and we prepare also some publications such as Water Manifesto and opposition papers on some topic. So you have the EWA website, but I think you already all use it in order to register. So that's already good. Regarding today event, I want to let you know that please use the chat box and or the Q&A function and the Q&A box to ask you questions to our speaker. Please, you can do it along the presentation. We'll also have, I'm hoping, a long Q&A session after it. Due to some technical reason and also due to the amount of participants, you will not be able to raise your hand and will not switch on your camera. So if you have any question, really please use the chat and Q&A function. And Michel, thank you again. You agreed to share your slide with the participants after it. So you will receive the presentation and this webinar is recorded and will be available on the EWA YouTube channel. So now about more the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. As EWA, we followed the process even before the recast. We had been calling for an update on a text even before 2022 when the Commission proposal came out. We provided inputs doing all of this, and now that the text is adopted, we will also, with the support of our members, have a look at the implementation at the national level, and we would like to provide feedbacks to the Commission or at the EU level in general if there is some issue that we see or if there is need for clarification. So we did around it a member survey, and here you can see what the most important point of the text is for our members. So we had some, and most important point, meaning where they potentially have more questions and or need for clarification. So you see, let's say top 4 with quaternary treatment requirements, extended producer responsibility, rainwater, stormwater management, and energy neutrality. In detail, what does it mean? So integrated urban wastewater management plan and stormwater overflow. I think the feedback from our members, they are looking for guidelines on how to either the calculation and or how to do the integrated urban wastewater management plans. And they are looking for guidelines, clarification, what's expecting for them, as for most of them, it's something new. We already had, I think last week, a webinar, a sponsored webinar on groundwater and sponge cities, where we had a colleague from the GRC presenting also this integrated urban wastewater management plan. So you can, it's again available on our YouTube channel. But yeah, we had a couple of questions on it. So I think that's where there is a need for clarification based on our member feedback. Then another point that came out strongly was quaternary treatment and extended producer responsibility. From our members, we see, most of them see that there is no major issue with it, but only if the extended producer responsibility process will come to play and will be smoothly adapted into national law. But if there is issue on it, and also meaning a funding issue, then there will be a lot of program on that side. There is also feedbacks from our members on a need to support research on quaternary treatment and how to do it better than what we can do now. And yeah, and the question of fundings in order to do it and to set up the new plans that will require quaternary treatment came out a couple of times as well. And last point, so energy neutrality and some questions on the articulation between those new requirements. So from the quaternary treatment and the energy neutrality principle, meaning energy neutrality, quaternary treatment requirement more energy than tertiary, and how do you balance it with the energy neutrality principle? So in a really short nutshell, I don't want to dive it too much into the feedbacks from our members, but that's it that we wanted to see today. And I hope, Michel, that your presentation can clarify or bring some guidelines on some of those points. So thank you very much for today's presentation, Michel. Again, for the participants, please use the Q&A and the chat box. You will receive the PowerPoint and the recording will be available. And Michel, if I'm not wrong, you asked me to share the presentation, so I will now move to yours and you can tell me when I go to the next slide. So let me just quickly do this. And
thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, Arthur, and good morning from Brussels to everybody. So my name is Michel Sponar. I am Deputy Head of the unit in charge of water and oceans, clean water services and oceans. And so we are working and dealing with the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, obviously, but also drinking water, water reuse, and also the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So I will try to answer to some of your questions, even if I cannot go into much more details. But first of all, I will present the main new things in this directive. I think on the next slides, you have a summary of the different steps that we have met for this adoption. So we had a proposal, the Council and the Parliament adopted the text at the end of November last year, and there was a large majority in the Parliament voting in favor of this text, a very large majority. And then in the Council, 24 member states were in favor of the text. and only 2 member states voted against and 1 abstained. So it was really a large endorsement in the Council and the Parliament with a consensus on the final text. It has entered in force on the 1st January of 2025 because it was published on the 12th of December last year, so meaning that we were calculating well, so that it entered in force for a full year, which will ease its implementation. And now member states have to start, and they have already started their work for transposing this directive into their national laws. And that should have be done. That should be done before the 31st July of 2027. And obviously, the Commission will check all that and check the quality and the deadlines of the transposition. On the next slides, I wanted to tell you that this directive fits very well with the new priorities of the Commission. In fact, we are also working now on water resilience, an initiative on water resilience. And in this initiative, we are discussing different things. And most of the team, which will be discussed in the water resilience initiative, are also, covered by this directive, starting from sustainable financing, where we have opened a new path for producer responsibility, while the competitiveness of the water industry will certainly be driven by the new standard and the modernization of the directive, which will require new investments into new areas with new techniques, and that will provide our water industry and the operator a boost for innovation and for competitiveness. We are promoting also the circular approach in the directive, notably for sludge, but also water reuse. Obviously, the water quality will be improved with the new directive, and we are trying also to mitigate water-related risk. So the water resilience strategy and initiative is in the making for the timing, but the team to be covered by this resilience strategy are already known. It's not neither a secret nor something which is new. I mean, and we are confident that this directive and its implementation fits well with the new directive of the Commission. On the next slide, it's a kind of summary in one slide of the new things which are included in this revised directive. I will go into some details for each of these new actions, starting with the rainwater and small agglomeration and individual appropriate system on the next slide. There you can see that there are different things, and there were already questions on integrated water plans. In fact, for rainwater, what we saw in the evaluation of this directive, which was done before we reviewed the directive, is that pollution due to rainwater has become really a source of concern, because we have made a lot of progress to equip our cities, villages, and with wastewater collection and treatment. But suddenly, due to not suddenly, but when you have a rain which is rain which is exceptional or above the normal rain regime, but a lot of pollution is going back to the rivers without any treatment. And that part of the pollution becomes important with climate change. The rain regime is changing, meaning that we have more and more episodes of important rains, and meaning that this pollution becomes in proportion important. So we thought that it was important to act on that, but at the same time, it's difficult to have a European-based, harmonized approach, totally harmonized approach, because we have to take into account the local condition. And that's why this integrated water management plan came in, which will take into account the local condition and which will have to be drafted by all the cities above 100,000 inhabitants by 2033, and later on by 2039 for those at risk between 10,000 and 100,000 inhabitants. Well, the directive explains what should be the contents of these plans. It is not something that we have invented. We have based ourselves on the experience of several countries which are applying already this concept. And so we took inspiration from them to define a little bit what should be in the plan, which is in the annex and in the article of the directive. On small agglomeration, it's relatively easy. We expand the scope with the same logic. We have made a lot of effort that now pollution from this small agglomeration becomes important in proportion. So we expand the scope to 1,000 inhabitants, from 2,000 to 1,000 inhabitants. While there are a lot of conditional time derogation, particularly for those countries where the systems of collection and treatment is not in place between 1,000 and 2,000 inhabitants. So if they can demonstrate that a certain percentage is not covered, they can gain more time, and we implement this aspect. Needless to say that the possibilities to use individual systems remain, so we don't impose centralized system everywhere every time. Depends a little bit on the completely on the local conditions, sorry. And for individual system, we think that even if this system can still be applied, they need to be better monitored and they need to have some horizontal condition so that we can also create a European market for this type of installation with a kind of European harmonized condition for their use and their functioning. So for that, we have an implementing act that we have to do by January 2028. On the next slide, that's the summary of the level of treatment that we are requesting from all wastewater treatment facility in the European Union. So secondary treatment is the rule. That's the minimum everywhere, every time. But you have some time derogation because, for instance, in coastal area or less sensitive area, according to the existing or the previous directive, there was a possibility to avoid secondary treatment, but this possibility is gone now, and it's normal because with the Water Framework Directive and the Marine Strategic Framework Directive, it's not possible anymore to have facilities with only primary treatment in these areas. But member states who were using this possibility will have 12 years to apply this condition and to plan and achieve their investments. And you have very specific case, but where 20 years were given after a negotiation. It's always a negotiation between the Council and the Parliament with the Commission for very specific case, but we are not completely convinced that this will be largely used. It's really, specific and not so often met cases. For nutrient and micropollutant, so we have reinforced the standards for nitrogen and phosphorus, and we have introduced new standards for micropollutants, and that will drive the new quaternary treatment, which will be have to be installed in all facilities above 150,000 inhabitants. Same for nitrogen and phosphorus. For all these big facilities, they will have to have nitrogen, phosphorus, and quaternary treatment. And there is not, it's not optional. I mean, for these facilities, there is no discussion anymore. They have to have this treatment. But between 10,000 inhabitants and 100,000 inhabitants, both for nitrogen, phosphorus, but also for micropollutant, there is a risk-based approach. So the tertiary treatment and quaternary treatment will be imposed only if there is a risk for the environment or public health. On the next slide, that's a summary of the new requirements on energy, which is also something quite new in the directive. So the first thing is that energy audits will be imposed in all facilities above 10,000 inhabitants by 2032. This is new and this is important. Some big facilities were already covered by another energy efficiency legislation, but here we are expanding the scope of the application of energy audit to all these facilities above 10,000. It is based on the result of the evaluation where we saw that some member states are moving towards energy neutrality for the sector. And so it was again a source of inspiration for us. And that's why we are imposing this target by 2045. This is not a target to be met by each facility. It's a national target, and meaning that some facilities will probably, we hope, will be positive in terms of energy production, renewable energy production. So for others, it might be very difficult to reach this objective energy neutrality, so they can compensate for the other one. And then also for greenhouse gas, we were discussing the possibility to introduce also climate neutrality objective, but it was not possible during this review because we do not have enough information on the cost and the consequence of that. So we impose more information and more monitoring and reporting on greenhouse gas emission that will trigger a possible future revision of the directive in the coming years. It's clear that we have to go through something and to act on climate neutrality. We did calculate that by imposing energy neutrality, we are already reducing by 40% the emission of greenhouse gas of the sector. Okay, on the next slide, we have also worked on circular economy, but also using the concept of prevention. So, for instance, for non-domestic wastewater, which are released in the collective system, when there are companies, SMEs releasing certain type of pollution in the system, they need a permit. And we've introduced also a clause that the operator of the wastewater treatment plant should be consulted on the permits, which is important because the operator at the end receive this pollution, and it's important that the permits are consulted with this operator. But also we are requesting to track different type of pollution in the inlets and outlets. And if there are some specific pollution which are not desirable in the wastewater treatment plant, we are requesting member states to track this pollution in their network and to try to reduce it at source so that the water use and the sludge can be better reused at the end. On resource recovery, we have a principle of pushing member states to recover nutrient when it's possible and to manage this nutrient according to the waste hierarchy, meaning again, the waste hierarchy is relatively simple. You start with prevention, you continue with reuse, recycling, reuse, and then in last resort, you can burn your sludge or landfill the sludge in last resort. So there is a hierarchy there. And we think that this waste hierarchy is important to apply here. And then we have the possibility at European level to impose minimum reuse for phosphorus, both for water reuse and for the sludge. And that should be translated into a delegated act to be adopted by 2028. On the next slide, it's a summary of the new system of producer responsibility. In fact, I'm saying it's a new system, but it's not really new. It's new in wastewater, but this system was inspired by, I think there are 155 existing EPR system in solid waste. So there is a long tradition of this producer responsibility in solid waste, and we were not very original. I would say, we took inspiration from the best practice already in place for solid waste, meaning that we try to find a balance between harmonized rules at European level. For this would cover the cost of the quaternary treatment, as it was already explained by Arthur. And in fact, in our study, we have found that pharmaceuticals and cosmetic industries are the dominant polluters of the urban wastewater treatment, urban wastewaters. I'm speaking about urban wastewater, so the wastewater going into our pipes, not the general pollution going into the environment. But there are other sectors, and there is a clause of review by 2033 to see at that time whether you have new information to possibly add new sectors in the system. But we will start with these two systems. There is different things like definition of the system of organization of the relation between the producer responsibility organization, the producer, and the wastewater treatment operator. So on the right side, you see a summary of the main obligation of each of the actors of the producer responsibility system. I must say that it triggers a lot of discussion for the timing, which is perfectly normal. I mean, we have started dialogue with all the players in the system. Industry has issued also a public paper where they present together the cosmetic and pharmaceutical industry their principles for implementing this new producer responsibility system. And this paper is also inspired by some best practice which are in place for solid waste. And then the operators have also issued a paper to explain their point of view. And so now we are starting a dialogue with all the stakeholders, including the member states, to really understand what are the consequences and how to implement in practice this system. So we had already meetings and we are continuing these meetings. There is an obligation for the Commission to organize best practice exchange. In fact, we've already started and we intend to continue this best practice exchange because it's important to have a permanent dialogue between the different stakeholders involved in the implementation of these important schemes. On the next slide, you can see that we have also introduced common rules for access to justice, compensation, and penalties. I will not go into too much detail, but these rules are now common for different texts that we have presented, like air quality or the Industrial Emission Directive. So these requirements are horizontal requirements which were accepted and endorsed by the Parliament and the Council. On the next slide, we also try to work on different aspects of governance of the sector. As you know very well, I mean, we don't have the choice of our operator. It's a captive market. Citizens have to, have an operator for their wastewater and drinking water, which is designated by their local authorities. So it's really important to have a full transparency of the sector to ensure that there is an adhesion of the citizen to an adhesion to the citizen to the objective of the water operators, but also an understanding of what they are paying in their bills. So we have included some requirements in the directive for the operator to have transparency on different key parameters, including on some performance indicator. And that is quite important for us. We think that this transparency is really important for the sector itself as well. There is new requirements also to track health parameters in wastewater. In fact, we think that during the pandemic of COVID-2, a lot of information were available in wastewater and were not used enough, So based on this lesson, we have tried in the directive to include the coordination between the health authorities and the wastewater treatment operators, so that there is a kind of definition of what health parameters should be followed and tracked in the system permanently or at the occasion of pandemics. And then there are few compulsory parameters that need to be monitored, like AMR, antimicrobial resistance. It's difficult for me to pronounce that, but I hope that you understand what I mean. And then also there is a compulsory monitoring during pandemics of the health relevant parameters. So this is quite new, but we thought that it was important to break the silos between the different administration and operators, in charge of wastewater and health management, public health management, just to make sure that if there is a new pandemic or a new suspicion of pandemic, that we have all the information in our hands. There are also new requirements on access to sanitation, which are very similar to the Drinking Water Directive, which foreseen also some requirements to ensure access to water particularly for vulnerable and marginalized people. On the next slide, it's a summary of the key actions that needs to be taken now at member states level. So a lot of risk assessment have to be done by the member states, but we have tried to coordinate with the Water Framework Directive cycle. So in fact, the Water Framework Directive reporting cycle is every 6 years, and we have aligned to that. And it starts, the next one will be in 2027. So that the risk assessment that have to be done into this directive are completely aligned with the analysis which needs to be done under the Water Framework Directive. And it concerns eutrophication, the risk due to rainwater in the cities, but also micropollutants. So you can see the different dates. I would like to highlight, obviously, the transposition. I already said that. In 2028, that's really an important one because member states will have to update their national program, which is a program of investments to be done to achieve this directive, and also identification of the source of funding, including the producer responsibility system. The producer responsibility system itself has to be in place by end 2028. And then you have different deadlines of identifying the different risks, and also to have the integrated wastewater management plans in place for the cities above 100,000 and then above 10,000, which are at risk. On the next slide, it's a summary of the main requirements of the directive and their deadline, which requires heavy investments. So you can see that we have tried to learn from the previous directive. The previous directive was really a well-done instrument, very simple, but probably in the previous directive, the deadline were too rapid. And so that's why we had a lot of infringement procedure, and we try to anticipate and try to avoid that in the future by giving enough time to the member states and to the operator. We are completely conscious that making these investments requires a lot of time. Investments, making a financing and achieving the investment. So it's a long cycle for this big infrastructure. That's why there is a progressive increasing of the investment between 2030 and 2045. All the investment needs to be done by 2045. And by 2045, when the full directive will be in application, the total cost was calculate and estimate it at around 4 billion per year by 2045. The benefits were estimated at 6 billion a year, and the coverage of the producer responsibility scheme should cover 1/3 of the costs which are related to the quaternary treatment. The rest will be probably covered by usual source of funding, so either public budget, which currently are covering 30% of the cost, including European funds, and 70% through water tariff. We made different calculation and estimation for all countries of the consequence of this financing in the impact assessment. So the next slide is showing a summary of all the implementing and delegated acts that we have to do. We have in total, we intend to do 14 implementing and delegated acts, and we have 12 where deadlines are imposed in the directive. I will not mention all of them, but I can certainly answer to question. And probably I would like to mention the second row, which is integrated management plan, where there were questions on the indicator and how to check the 2%, but that will be included in an implementing act. So we will continue on this integrated management plan to provide guidance to the member states and the local operator through this implementing act. Another important one is extended producer responsibility, because all cosmetic and pharmaceuticals sector are covered by this system, but there is a possibility of exemption for those products which are not leading to micropollutant. It's perfectly logic. I mean, fully biodegradable products, for instance, should be exempted from the system because they are not causing any pollution at the level of the quaternary treatment. So there we have the obligation, in fact, and the possibility for the Commission possibility or obligation to define criteria for exonerating this micropollutant. Then we have also, but I said that already, a delegated act for phosphorus recovery. On the next slide, you have the other implementing of delegated act. There are few on monitoring. We need harmonized monitoring method for antimicrobial resistance, but also for PFAS, microplastics, and probably micropollutant as well. On reporting, it's relatively straightforward. We will explain to the member states the format of reporting for different parameters. And then on energy and greenhouse gas, and I'm maybe anticipating some question also, we intend to have an important one, which is the practical calculation method to assess whether the energy neutrality objective is met or not met. And that will be done also through an implementing act. I think I have my last slide just to explain a little bit how we intend to organize the work in the coming years. In fact, we have an expert group which consists with all member states, but also observer. Amongst the observer, I think EWA is one of the observers, but also other operators and other companies. And then now the pharmaceuticals company and the cosmetic companies have also decided to apply to become observer, which is not a problem. On the contrary, it's really welcome because, as I said, we need all the involved stakeholders around the table. For the implementing and delegated act, we will have this implementing and delegated act will have to be discussed in this expert group. So they will all be presented there and discussed there. For the implementing act, there will be a vote of the member states. Then we need a qualified majority. For the delegated act, we need to consult the expert group. And then for the preparation of all this implementing and delegated act, we have the support of European Environmental Agency in Copenhagen on reporting, and also AMR. We will have a consultant on the exemption for producer responsibility, but also for PFAS monitoring, because it's very specific and we need some external expertise for these two aspects. And then the Joint Research Center from the Commission will help us for all the other implementing delegated acts. In fact, they will prepare the technical contents of these acts, and this will be discussed into different technical subgroup of the expert group, and then they will report to the overall expert group, so that all that will be done in transparency and with the involvement of the stakeholder. And I think it's my last slide. The last slide is to thank you for your attention, and I'm open to have a question. I will try to do my best to answer you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Michel. Yes, you are right. EWA is part of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive Recast expert group as an observer. And I think as we also welcome the pharmaceutical and cosmetic colleagues that decide to join for the EPRs. As you said, there is a lot of question on our side, on their side as well, which is understandable. And we also believe that we need to work together and to discuss to find a common ground that will be acceptable for everyone. And we're also looking for the subgroup term of reference soon to see how can we also support the commission, but also our members into those groups. So thank you very much for your presentation. I see we had already was a lot of questions either a bit on the chat and or the Q&A function. So I will stop sharing the screen. So I think now everyone sees you better, and I will take couple because I think for some of them it's of course a bit following the structure from your presentation. Therefore, we had already couple into the chat and some that we shared potentially with you. So I think we had a couple of questions in a way towards Article 5. Rainwater, but also definition. So I see it like 2 or 3 on is an official definition of micropollutants. So what does micropollutants mean more specifically? And I had also the opposite, but I think it's linked. You have in Annex 5 for the IUWW MP, so for the management plans, you have objective for the reduction of pollution from stormwater overflow, including the following, and B, the progressive reduction of macroplastic and not micro at that point. So I think I will ask you directly with those 2 questions. So what does micropollutants mean for you into the text, and also the microplastic, how do you? So I think we can start with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Micropollutant, there is a definition in the directive. We are conscious that the definition is relatively broad. It refers to existing legislation like the CLP legislation. For the time being, this is a definition that we discuss, inside the Commission first, obviously, and then during the discussion with the Parliament and the Council, we try to refer to existing legislation and to not reinvent the wheel. So the most important for us is now to ensure that, when we are going to define exemption criteria for some products which are not leading to micropollutant, that these criteria are clear. And again, we intend to apply existing legislation when defining these criteria, starting with existing tests. For instance, on biodegradability, there are different tests in different legislation or defined by the OECD. So our meaning is to not reinvent the wheel, but simply to use the existing European legislation. So, but there is a definition in the directive of what means micropollutant, but I'm conscious that this definition is quite broad. On the management plan, I already explained that we will have an implementing act to define some elements which are a little bit, more complex in the for the management of rainwater. Macroplastics, I think that it's clear that during big rains, you have all seen some images. I remember Seine River, which was overflowed by macroplastic, meaning big piece of plastics, everywhere. So something needs to be done there, and we were not very requesting a lot there, but we are asking in this management plan to consider, some actions there specifically to capture this big piece of plastics. But I think there is a lot of margin left at local level to do that. So that was the meaning of this approach on Article 5 and integrated water management. We think also for Article 5 that a lot of preventive action would be useful. For instance, to avoid that clean water is going into the pipes. So that means a lot of preventive action, but also, to better use the so-named green or blue infrastructure. That is also in the directives. There is a kind of hierarchy of action which is defined in the directive itself.
Thank you. So staying into that article, we also had some question about the 2% for the discharge pollutant load, which someone mentioned, I think in a Q&A, that in their opinion, then this is not mandatory, it's an indicative target. So what is the expected acceptable range in function of local characteristic? I think you can read the question as well in the chat. Yeah. as
Yeah.
it was a long one. I think you will see it better than me. Piti Rose Saldana Matos. Yeah.
I have difficulty to follow in the chat,
Okay.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
No, the 2% is not mandatory. It was part of the discussion, you know, because it's really difficult to have a compulsory target at European level, because indeed we have to take into account local characteristics. So, I mean, it will be to the local authorities to define their own objective. You know, obviously, if they can manage to be below 2%, that's good. Good, you know. I've seen different cases, you know, where it's not a problem to go below 1%, you know, but for others, you know, below 5%, they should invest in very large infrastructure, which is not possible. So that's why it's an indicative target. I know it's a weakness of the directive, but at the same time, I think that we need flexibility, you know, to make sure that we have cost-effective approach, which can only define at local level.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and I think, yeah, but I think you already partly answered during your presentation, because we had another one as well on actually still on the same article, like how to calculate the annual collected urban wastewater load calculated in dry weather condition. But I think this you answered it during your presentation, right?
Yes, and also that will be detailed in the future implementing act. On the alternative indicator on the 2% there, we will have to go into the details on how to calculate all that in practice.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So as you say, there's a lot, so I'm trying to sort out a bit to keep going towards more or less the same topic and to not just come in one and then come back to it after it. So just give me a second, please. Otherwise, I think we had one. So I would say EPR, if it's fine with you, Michel, I think I will take it a bit after it, because there seems to be a lot. So I will maybe go to some other slower, let's say, a bit less. So what are so I think first question you are okay, I think it's the same. We had the first question, will there be any methodology for determining the weekly maximum load BOD5? And the participants, in my opinion, everyone set it differently, then the calculated P number is incomparable. The first one on the Q&A.
Yeah, we discussed that during the parliament, and we have not a mandate to do that for the time being. But if guidance is needed, we'll see in the practical implementation of the directive, and if really it come back. But it was not seen as a major issue during the negotiation by the member state and the council, so we have not really a mandate on that. But again, this type of things could be discussed in the expert group.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's exactly, I mean, the aim of that expert group as well is for our member to provide some difficulties or feedbacks, and because it's always the same, I would say, during the implementation phase. You have always point where you see that it would be really easy and it's not, and you have some others where you thought it would be a massive drama and really complicated, and at the end it was a smooth. So I can only encourage either our members, but also members from other water association to get in touch with them if they have to share the feedback and or with you directly. I think I will move on because we had one questions, Article 11 on a chat concerning energy neutrality. Would it be possible for you to clarify what's taken into account? And the person is quoting the article, energy generated on-site or off-site by or on behalf of the owner or the operator of urban wastewater treatment.
Yeah, as I said, this was a long discussion amongst the three institutions, and at the end, we have the possibility, and we have to make an implementing act on the practical method of calculation of energy neutrality. I must say that this work will start now, and we have the experience of some countries which are imposing that, and they have calculation method for that. So we'll take inspiration from those countries. And again, try to not reinvent the wheel again, but simply use the methodology, made by these countries and use their experience in reporting from the wastewater treatment operator to make sure that, the calculation of this energy neutrality is done on the same grounds amongst the member states. So that will be also clarified in the implementing act. But all in all, the text is relatively open to also consider source of renewables which are not strictly produced on the site. That's absolutely clear. For instance, if sludge are digested, but not strictly on the site, the energy produced by this sludge in other site should be taken into account. So this is an example, but there is a multiplication of examples. It's difficult here and now to mention all of them, but it's clear that we need to continue the work on that and to be more precise on the requirements.
Yeah, and I see on the chat someone added as well, but also still on that topic, but I'm assuming it will be via the expert group and also the subgroup on energy neutrality and greenhouse gas emission. If there will be available any methodology for energy audit according to the Article 11 and what does imply into it? Thank you.
Yeah, there we refer to the existing methodology which are existing under other European legislation on energy efficiency. Yeah? So the reference to the audits and their definition defined in another directive. We again refer to existing context.
Yeah. And someone is also asking if you're aware if there's already new EU countries that already have a calculation methods for the energy neutrality, but I think, as you just said, just mention into the other legislation, right?
I can mention Denmark. Now, Denmark is probably the most advanced, but I know that Netherlands was also working on it. There is also some work in Scotland, which is not in the European Union anymore, but they have also made progress there. So we have few examples there already, and we are working with these countries. And also they agree to bring their experience to the benefits of the whole group. So all that is going on.
Yes. Yeah, yes. I mean, as you said, they are not anymore part of, let's say, the EU family, but it does not mean that the information flow and exchange is stopped directly after it. And there is for sure things that we can learn one from each other. I'm trying to look at also a bit the chat and again to group it. So we still have a lot on. So this we already answered, or we'll come back to the topic. Yeah, we had just before, so to gain a bit of time, which is not really, but I think it's more like teaching for you. Could you please clarify the difference between an implementing and delegating act? And I will throw you under the bus on that one, Michel, and then I gain 2 minutes to look for other topics to start. Thank you.
Yeah, the main difference is that an implementing act is considered as an act which helps the implementation of the directive. So for the delegated act, it's a kind of complement of the obligation of the directive. So the processes of consultation is a little bit different. A delegated act needs to be proposed by the Commission after consultation of the stakeholders, and then we propose it, and then the Parliament and the Council have a vote, after they can accept or refuse it. So the implementing acts are discussed and proposed by the Commission, but then there is a vote inside the expert group. And so we need a qualified majority there. But the main difference is really delegated are completing the legislation, to implementing acts are more there to really make the implementation harmonized in a sense. But I'm not a lawyer, so that's what I understood.
Yeah. Sorry, so thank you for the reply. So I think we had also some questions on monitoring, and I've see if I look in the chat and then move back again after to the Q&A. So how will you look in practice the monitoring of microbiological parameter, especially for E. coli and Rococci, and are there core parameter for all receiving waters? I think that's talking about either Article 18 or 21. Thank you.
Voilà, that I cannot answer here and no. I mean, we managed to have some specialists on AMR, to start working on these methodologies, and they will consider all that in their paper. There was a paper, published also in the, during together with the impact assessment on AMR, and I would encourage those interested to go in the annex of the impact assessment, where the GRC made a paper on AMR. And with the support of an expert there, and you have already some, answer and more precise information there. But we are working on it, and that's really a question to be defined, by the specialist when we are doing this implementing act on monitoring AMR.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, my knowledge is limited there,
Oh, good. You said you will answer as best as you can, and you already can do it better than I'm assuming 99.9% of us there. Okay, I think we had as well. So yeah, EPR quaternary, I try to keep it after it to see how can we merge it. And I see already here we had some questions as well on term of information to the public, like Article 24. Member states should ensure that adequate and up-to-date information on urban wastewater collection and treatment is available to the public online in a user-friendly and customized way in each agglomeration. So one of the question was, what would be considered adequate information? I think there is also some questions as well there in terms of how far do we need to push transparency and how far can we what do we put the cursor between, let's say, not secrecy, but things that could be sensible data and sensible to share and some transparency. And as again, we had also questions more on data collection, considering the recognized need for more openness of data on wastewater collection and treatment. What is the timeline for this development and what mechanisms are being explored to ensure mandatory data provision? Thank you.
There are a lot of questions, but I think that most of the answers are in the directive itself. I mean, this article on transparency, my understanding apply already now, because in fact, unless it is specified for some of them in the directive that there is a deadline now, but in fact, you know, as soon as the directive is in force, which is the case, most of these articles are already, you know, valid for now. So now there will be also transposition, which will be enforced, you know, this, the national requirements on transparency. And so in the national transposition, maybe some more precise rules could be included. That depends on each member state. The directive fixes a minimum objective, and then the member states are always free to be more precise on the requirements or to add new requirements. I mean, that's the rule of the European Treaty. So on that, I can only refer to what exists in the directive. It's already very precise. I mean, the things that are there are already quite demanding for the operator. We are conscious of that, but as I said, transparency of the operator for us is really important, and also for the co-legislator. You know, so we think that, as I was mentioning, as it's a captive market, it's really important to ensure some degree of transparency. I'm conscious that, you know, some performance indicator cannot be compared as such between the operator because the conditions are quite different. That's perfectly understandable. But again, you know, if there are differences, you know, in terms of performance, some justification are needed, you know, and that's just transparency.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think complementing, because I think we took the wrong part for the second point, was what measures are being taken to overcome barriers to data gathering and data sharing among stakeholders and the general public? And in bracket, how would the European Commission plan to encourage water utilities that are reluctant to share data?
Well, we are encouraging, I mean, we are imposing transparency, so it's not a matter of encouragement. I mean, this needs to be implemented. It's in the directive, so, and this needs to be transposed at national level, you know. So now the control of that will be first in the hands of the member states, but in case of infringement, it comes back to us.
Yeah. So, okay, of course, there's more questions. Yeah, I will come back to, I think, okay, EPR, PFAS, we have a lot. Okay, I think definition micropollutants, we gave it earlier, but we have a questions, specific case, I think, on the chat, not the last one, the one before. In the Croatian coastal area, we have not yet implemented the goals of the old directive now, the one from 91, regarding secondary treatment, and the new directive requires an upgrade to the third level of treatment. Do you recommend that facility for the third level of treatment be planned immediately?
Oh, there are deadlines which are included in the directive, so member states will have time to upgrade their facilities progressively. As I was mentioning, you know, these deadlines were negotiated in the Council and the Parliament, and obviously the final text is a compromise between the willingness of the Parliament to go fast, you know, and the
Yeah.
council, which has difficulties to I mean, not difficulties, but it was a compromise, and it's always like that in this type of negotiation. Huh?
Yeah. So was not here. Okay. I think we had again some questions, some micropollutants or not. I think one in should the indicator micropollutants be selected at the member state level, same six for all plants, or should the list be tailor-made for each plant and maybe change over time? Yeah, okay. And we had again some others. What method are suggested to monitor microplastic? What size range are considered? And so on. So I think, yeah.
Yes, well, on PFAS and microplastics, as I mentioned, we will have a work on the monitoring method. We just issued some guidance on PFAS monitoring in drinking water. So this will be our starting point because this method exists for drinking water. And we'll check to what extent these methods are adaptable to wastewater. So this work is foreseen. And same for microplastics, by the way. We have a methodology for measuring them in drinking water. So now the challenge is to check to what extent this methodology can also apply to wastewater. So we are not starting from zero. Simply, we need to see whether these methodologies for drinking water are fit for purpose for wastewater.
Yeah. Sorry. So here no. Okay. So this you mentioned. This you mentioned. This you mentioned adequate information was done. Yeah, on micropollutants, we still had a question. So what are the specific of this micropollutants parameter, and does the minimum allowed value for discharge vary depends on the industry of the effluents the discharge is coming from?
Yes, but here I want to be very clear. We are talking about urban wastewater. So in
Yeah.
principle, micropollutant coming from big industries should be covered by a permit or not land into collective systems. So we are really talking about micropollutant coming from some specific sector, but not industry as such, So because that's really a completely different topic and issue. The micropollutant coming from specific industries are covered by the Industrial Emission Directive. So they're out of the scope of this directive. Huh?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And then I see on the chat we also had a question: why was 150,000 PE chosen as threshold for certain measure and not 100,000? I would say it's what you mentioned earlier, just negotiation between the Commission, Council, and Parliament. And I'm not sure there is much more to add.
No, but in the initial proposal of the Commission, we proposed to have this threshold at 100,000 facilities inhabitants. And it was just a calculation between the number of facilities and the pollution created. So we have tried to propose something which is an optimization between the number of facilities, to be covered and the pollution created. With 100,000, this report was interesting. But if you go to 150,000, you have less facilities and less pollution covered. So it was a discussion which was, subject to a deal between the legislator. And at the end, with 150, we are capturing still a lot of pollution with a limited number of facilities in the European Union, which leads to reduction of administrative burden and a kind of optimal solution for the application of some of these requirements.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So I think we move where we have a couple more questions slowly, EPR and quaternary treatment. If you see some that you want to merge or take already directly, feel free, Michel. Otherwise, I'm trying to see what.
I think that classical discussion and, on first the cost, and cost assessment, and we are very conscious of that. I mean, in the impact assessment, we have used the database with 25,000 facilities, and then we apply quaternary treatment, obviously above 100,000 inhabitants. So the new text is talking about 150. And then we have applied a kind of factor risk between 10,000 and 100,000 inhabitants, which we thought was very prudent because we consider that 70% of the facilities between 10,000 and 100,000 should be covered, which probably is excessive because now in the revised directive, the definition of the area at risk are a little bit less stringent than the initial proposal of the Commission. So during the discussion with the stakeholder and the member states, we are conscious that today there is an uncertainty around the cost because mainly because the definition of area at risk is subject to divergent interpretation. So for that, we are working on that. There is an implementing act also to help member states to define this area at risk with common criteria. In fact, the criteria are already in the directive, but we intend to help their implementation in practical grounds. This is a priority for us. And we hope that with that, we will reduce the uncertainties related to the cost. I have seen a lot of studies on that, and I'm conscious that some part of industry are mentioning the worst case studies, where it is assumed that quaternary treatment should be installed in all facilities, which is not the case with this directive. Again, it is a risk-based approach, and that makes really the bulk of the difference between the cost assessment made by the Commission and some studies that I have seen and that are circulating. Honestly, with the member states now, several member states are starting only now, their assessment of what area should be considered at risk. And also they are making some additional studies on the cost in their context. But, the last meeting with the member states was very clear. There is no, there is no clear cost assessment made by the member states, which are taken, on board for the time being. So the remaining study remains the one of the Commission, which is based on made by the Joint Research Center with very transparent methodologies, which are all on our website. And so it's a cost estimate. So now in the future, we'll see, we will track that, we will follow that. We are conscious that there are concerns around that. And if need be, we can adjust the system later on. But for the time being, we have no better cost estimate at European level. So voilà, that's all what I can say, but I'm conscious that this needs a continued discussion. Same for the two sectors which are covered now by the producer responsibility system. Again, I'm insisting, on the fact that we are talking about urban wastewater and not general pollution coming from different sectors, because obviously there are other micropollutants coming from other sectors. That's absolutely clear. But we made a feasibility study, which is also published online with detailed, methodology there. I know that, there are still some demands to have even more transparency of what we have done, and that we will provide. That's absolutely clear. But also, the methodology is really detailed already in this study, which is completely accessible publicly. And then there is also a review clause by 2033. We hope to have much more monitoring data by that time, and then we will see whether an adjustment is needed, as I said, and as it is said in the directive, there is a review, an evaluation which is foreseen by 2033, which include different things, including this one, to check whether other sectors should be added in the future. Voilà, for the rest, may I just recall, that we are applying the polluter pays principle, which is the principle of the treaty, the European Treaty. That we had the European Court of Auditor report showing that this is not well applied in the water system. So that this report is also mentioned in the impact assessment, and that we are targeting only quaternary treatment, and that's very important because part of the micropollutants are removed in secondary, tertiary treatment before, and sometimes a large part. So we are only targeting the cost of the quaternary treatment. This is very strict in the directive and completely explained in Article 9 of the directive. So meaning that, in fact, it's not total application of the polluter pays principle because we are only targeting the last step. But we were thinking that it was not reasonable to try to target also the previous steps, simply because it's difficult to make an allocation of the cost of the steps between the different polluting parameters. And also because we thought that this quaternary treatment is new, and so it's better to start with something which is completely new. This is explained in the impact assessment as well. So that's to answer to some of the question. But I know that we need to continue working on that and to answer to the legitimate question from the different stakeholders, and we are working on it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think you mentioned rightfully that member states, they are starting the work on it. We can also, from the surveys that I mentioned earlier from the EWA member and especially the national member, we also see some already, let's say, some differences among member states. On some are already a bit more advanced than the others, but we also see there, and not only due to the obligation in the text to have cooperation among member states on an EPR implementation, but that we see that everyone is a bit asking around who is doing what, and they are already sharing best practice among member states. And I think, at least for me personally, that puts me a bit a bit more optimistic into the implementation, and that's also to have like a more efficient or a better implementation at the EU level. That will not be let's say, too many differences among member states, but I think it's also why the Commission put it this obligation for member states to exchange information on it, right?
Yes.
Because that's, I think that was one of the questions as well, a bit like, how will the Commission, ensure like a more or less harmonized implementation of it? I think that's also from, let's say, cosmetic and pharmaceutical. I think that's also a big question at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
On that, I would like to mention a few things. I mean, we continue the exchange of best practice. It has started, as I mentioned, but we are really at the starting point now. At the same time, I think that all stakeholders have to take their own responsibility. I mean, there are things that we can do at European level, which are simply, we have already taken a lot of responsibility by defining the key principle of this producer responsibility system in the directive itself, which, contrary to waste management, I mean, it was inspired by the wastewater, the waste framework directive, but we have adapted that to the wastewater treatment directive. And so there are a lot of things which are already harmonized at European level, but obviously we need flexibility because some member states will apply that in, taking into account the organization of the water sector. So that's where we try to find a balance. At the same time, the sector themselves, as I was mentioning, the cosmetic and the pharmaceutical sector define 9 key principles that they would like to apply when they are going to apply this producer responsibility system. And, obviously, the producer responsibility organization will have to be done by the sector themselves. So, I mean, they have also a responsibility to define harmonized rules, and there we will encourage them and try to help on that as well, But the 9 principles defined by this pharmaceutical and cosmetic sector were already presented, and there are things which are, really interesting in terms of harmonization also. And I think that this sector are very conscious that they need also to take their own responsibility to ensure some harmonization between the application of the EPR, and that's their role, and it's perfectly fine. I think that this is probably one of the conditions to ensure, some harmonization amongst the member states. But we cannot have a full harmonization again because the water sector are different in the countries. Huh?
Thank you very much. Moving a bit out of the EPR topic, I think there's 2 questions I would like to potentially like merge in a way. So we had one, how does the directive affect constructed wetlands treatment? And another one from someone saying that he's working on a plant with lagoon, and he or she is interested on how does a revised directive deal with analyzed lagoon discharge, because the current directive analysis concerning discharge from lagoon should be carried out on filtered sample.
Yeah, again, that's really a too precise question for me. I'm sorry, I need to check, and don't hesitate to send this question in writing to our services, and we will try to have a look,
Yeah. Thank you very much. Wait, so up we had also, again, coming back, Article 5, so on a 2%, how is the 2% being assessed in comparison to others non-point source of water, of surface water pollution, for example, so agriculture, stormwater emission, direct from highway, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, the GRC made, and they even published 2 articles on how this 2% were calculated and assessed. Again, we are talking about urban context now, so in principle, other source should be limited, like pesticides or like, other type of source, particularly from agriculture. So in principle, this water should not land into the pipes of which are covered by this directive. Huh? But again, you know, I would encourage you, because I also some question on the different studies that I am mentioning. If you Google the impact assessment of the Commission, you will find it rapidly. And then in the annex of the impact assessment, you have all the studies that we have done for the impact assessment and also the article which were published. And, you know, you have also the links there. You can find a lot of information, notably on AMR, notably on stormwater overflows, but also on micropollutants. So there was an article of the GRC on micropollutants, 2 articles on the for treatment as well. And yeah, there was also a question on for treatment and energy neutrality that we realized that you know, for treatment will require more energy. That's absolutely clear. But that's why we were thinking that it's very important to give the signal and to push member states and the operator to move in that direction, precisely because the energy demand for the for treatment will increase. And so that's another constraint indeed of the system. And so that's why we have to take all the possible measures to reduce our energy demand and also to produce renewable, you know, through the system. So we are conscious that it's another challenge for that. At the same time, we hope, you know, for treatment, you know, the standards for treatments were directly inspired by the Swiss experience. So there is an objective of a reduction of 80%, which is really, you know, inspired from 10 years of experience in Switzerland. So we are not very original there as well. We really took the standards from the Swiss legislation. And what we saw and when we discussed is that operational costs are important for treatment and more than investment costs, and particularly energy. So if we manage to move at the same time in the direction of energy neutrality, that would decrease, we hope, the cost of for treatment also. Also needless to mention that you know, when we made the estimates of the cost, it was done on the basis of the existing energy price. So on one side, this energy price have increased. So it's clear that inflation came after. But at the same time, with energy neutrality, it was not taken into account in the calculation of the cost, neither the possible new innovation developments and due to the economy and also possible economy of scale. And that's something that our Swiss colleagues are insisting, you know, the fact that now this, you know, will be applied in a large number of facilities. There is a possibility to have a reduction of the cost also in the future. And it was not taken into account in our cost estimate because it's really difficult to assess what would be the influence of an economy of scale on the cost in the future. I'm sorry, I've come back to that because there were a lot of questions on the cost assessment, and I understand these questions are, again, perfectly legitimate. Huh?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we saw it from us. You saw it on a slide that I shared at the beginning. I think it's the first questions. And I mean, you also answer one of our points on this link between quaternary treatment and energy neutrality. So thank you very much. We also had a point, I think it's also a bit of fear I feel when I talk with our members, is in terms of pricing, what's going to happen if all the 27 member states start, all of them at the right moment to look at the same product and all of it. So I think the different, and would they be enough, let's say, qualified workers to build and set up the quaternary treatment in all the plants across Europe? So I think there is some questions in terms of, let's say, lifelong learning from the workforce, but also research to be developed or to be focused on quaternary treatment.
Yes, but I think our standards are a driver for all that, you know, and that's why we have a calendar which is very, very prudent. You know, we start the first investment, the first obligation start in 2033 only for quaternary treatment. Huh? And in 2033, member states have to cover 10% of the facility being at risk, you know, between 10,000 and 100,000 inhabitants, and 20% of the facilities above 150 inhabitants. So again, you know, if there is a real problem with the cost, let's put it like that, that we are not anticipating, honestly, for the timing. But if there is a real problem, we will know by 2033 at the latest, you know, which is the time of the evaluation of this directive. So we have plenty of time to analyze the consequence of this system progressively. And as I was mentioning, by 2033, you know, the first investment start with a low mode, and then it will increase between 2033 and 2045. Well, I think that said, there is also indeed a challenge of competence. But again, we hope that with this, you know, timeline and with the, you know, driver here, you know, we will create this competence and expand them. Having that said, as I mentioned, in Switzerland, there is 10 years of experience of application of this quaternary treatment. And also some member states have already started their investments in quaternary treatment. Huh? So we are not starting from zero again.
Yeah, thank you very much. So if you see some other questions, feel free to pick one already. I think we had one or two on PFAS monitoring. So one was, does it mean that as of today, no specific monitoring guidelines are applying for PFAS?
I'm sorry, Arthur, I was reading
Yeah.
at the time. Sorry.
No, sorry. I say one of the question was also on PFAS monitoring.
Yeah.
Say like PFAS monitoring, I think the person then is asking, does it mean that at the moment there is no specific monitoring guidelines for PFAS? Because you mentioned that some will be.
Yes. No, the only guidance is coming from drinking water, and so there you have guidance and you have a clear instruction. For wastewater, we have to develop that. We recently, because PFAS is really an issue for drinking water now, we are encouraging the member states to apply already in advance the drinking water directive, where monitoring of PFAS will be compulsory by next year. But we try to push member states to start earlier, and also to try to monitor PFAS in areas where there are known risks. Having that said, wastewater treatment facilities, to our knowledge, represent the risk when they are connected with the source of PFAS. For instance, we have seen that PFAS might be high in wastewater treatment facilities near airport, for instance, because they are using these foams with PFAS. So there are specific places where it makes sense. In the directive now, we are imposing this monitoring of PFAS when there is a water catchment, But then in the future, with the future, review of the environmental quality standard directive, this might be expanded to other areas. So, but at the start in this directive, it's related to catchment areas.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Trying to look around again a bit more. I think we had, again, I think the last question on a Q&A at the moment, Michel. So again, Article 5. The new requirements in Article 5 will be very difficult to achieve, as in many urban areas, especially in older cities with aging infrastructure, the existing sewer system is combined, wastewater and stormwater. It is practically impossible to separate them, let alone build potential retention system. Do you want to comment on?
Yeah, I think that there we encourage to have a preventive approach, so to try to avoid clean water in the pipe, as I was mentioning. We are conscious that obviously it's impossible to rebuild separate network everywhere. And at the same time, separate network, sometimes, the separate network could also drive some pollution, that's absolutely clear. So the second option after in the directive is to try to optimize the existing infrastructure. What we see is that, in several cities, you have reservoirs to fight against floods, but in fact, these reservoirs are only managed in terms of quantity of water and not quality of water. So, for instance, if you have a big rain, there is always a first flush, with a lot of pollutant driven from the streets and going into the system. And we think that with the IT tools and with better digitalization, this pollution can be in priority sent to the reservoir, so that the clean water after some dilution can be, can go back to the environment. So this is another example of actions that do not need big investments on major infrastructure or green investments, but that can anticipate and try to optimize the existing functioning of the system as a whole, So the wastewater treatment plants connected to the collector, connected to the reservoir, so that this is managed in a way that the most polluted water are captured in the infrastructure and the more clean water or diluted water are sent back to the environment. These are the type of things that we are encouraging there, but I'm not saying that it's easy, certainly not. It will require indeed some intelligence and some also cooperation between different actors. What we saw also in the evaluation is that in the countries, the people in charge of managing the collecting system, the reservoir, the wastewater treatment plants are not always the same operator, And so we hope that with this, and also those in charge of urbanization are certainly not the same, So we hope that with this plan, we will put the different actors together in the city so that there is an integrated thinking of water management.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, I'm referring to the last webinar we had sponsor on sponge cities, where your colleague from the DRC presented again the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive with the stormwater overflow and the management plans. And we also had someone from, I think in English would be the Rainwater Agency from Berlin, which also presented because they had actually this type of issue with a part of the system being together, another one separated. And yeah, I think we see, and we also felt the need there. One of the key messages I would say after it was actually the needs for more inclusion with the city planning and let's say yeah, units and all of it. And I think that's a bit more like a circular approach would be is needed there, as you just mentioned, and to potentially talk with people that were not used to talk with before as water actors. And to have these needs of a bit more like blue or green, gray infrastructures in cities that also feel like is supported by the text.
I see two interesting questions at the end.
Yeah, please.
That's the treatment. We will not recommend type of treatment. I mean, the legislation is always technically neutral. We are just fixing objective in a directive, and then it's to the member states operator to find the best way to reach this objective and target. So here we are talking about 80% reduction of different indicators, and now different technologies can be used. Usually it's activated carbon with ozonation in combination or alone, but that depends really on the local condition again to try to find an optimal way to do that. And the last question is really interesting because indeed we took inspiration from the Swiss system for the technical aspects, but not from the financing aspects. But in fact, indeed in Switzerland, it's a citizen paying for this additional treatment. It was an option that we have considered also at European level, but at the same time, I must really and firmly say that it's a political decision. I mean, in the Parliament and the Council, the two options were on the table, and the Council and the Parliament had initial positions which were different. And at the end, there was a compromise between the political institution after a political discussion, on the fact that these two sectors should cover at least 80% of the cost of quaternary treatment. But again, this is the work of our democracy. I cannot say that better. It was a political choice, and the alternative would have been indeed that the citizen, through water tariff or public budget, would have paid for this quaternary treatment. But that, again, the Commission, has to apply now the decision taken by the co-legislator, and that's it. And that's how our system is functioning.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I think we had again one last question. Can you please provide example which category will be considered micropollutants? I'm just asking it because I saw it a couple of times in a chat already and forgot to pick it up.
Yeah. No, but there, I would like to refer to the study that I was mentioning. You have, for instance, a study done by the GRC. They have identified 1,300 chemicals which are representing micropollutants, found in the wastewater, in urban wastewater. And there you have a lot of details of this substance in the annex, of this article, which was also published in a scientific review and review, by a scientific, review. So there I would encourage you, because I cannot go into much more details here and now. It's not possible for me.
Yeah. Thank you. I had a question that goes, I think, into a topic that we didn't point from on individual system. Do you see it? Can you? So I will just read it as it's a bit long. So in point 10, it is written that new design method for individual system should not be required from existing individual system. So if someone already has an individual system, shouldn't the government require them to provide proof of the design parameters that are applied in the new directive? All systems do not have certificates, confirmation of efficiency for nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. Or do such system needs to be replaced? Thank you.
I think there, I try to find the question again, but
sorry.
an individual system. I mean, as I was mentioning, we will develop an implementing act with common standards for the system, And so there will be standards for the design of the individual system, but also there will be recommendation for inspection. So I think that inspection and maintenance, it's impossible for the member states to ensure inspection of each facility. It's really difficult. So, what we see in most advanced member states is that these inspections are done on a risk-based approach. So they try to identify the risk and then they make ad hoc inspection, or they organize also, they have, repertoire of the individual system which are in place with different type of information which are asked to the people having this individual system. So there are different systems already in place in the European Union, and we will try to fix all that into the implementing act to make sure that not only the design is appropriate, but also the actions to make sure that they are properly working. For instance, if you have a very simple septic tanks with, it should be regularly empty, and that could be checked, through some inspection action, Or if you build a new house, in several countries, it is already imposed to have a mini wastewater treatment plant, if it's impossible to connect it to the public system. So all that needs to be fixed also in the implementing act. Huh?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm looking a bit at all the questions remaining. Do you see any? I think some of them you replied already, especially about the EPR and just the general discussion we had.
Yes, I see some additional question on some companies, which cannot afford financial burden. Yeah. But we, in our estimates, we are talking about €3 per person in 2045 when the whole system will be in place. So unless we are making, even if we are making an error in the cost estimate by 2, we are still talking about €6 per person per year in 2045 when the full system will be in place. Huh? So having that said, the system of fees, is defined in the directive, and there will be a discussion inside the producer responsibility organization on how to fix this fee. But this system needs to be defined in the recognition procedure of the producer responsibility organization, and then member states will have to check that this system of fee is compatible with the objective of this directive, and that's it, So there is a responsibility, common responsibility of the member states to control that the fees, are conform to the directive, and a responsibility of the producer to make sure that the fees are equitable between them, and to propose a system which, which is acceptable for all of them, But that's different level of responsibilities, which we hope will avoid this type of problem, in the future. But again, with our assessment of the cost, we think that there is no problem, and it is recognized also in the directive through Recital 21. Voilà. And there is another important question, on confidentiality of some information to be provided by the sector. Yeah. And there are also some requirements in the directive to make sure that the producer responsibility organization ensure this confidentiality. So you have some language there. We are conscious of that. This is not new. This is also happening in other producer responsibility systems. And so this clause on confidentiality was cut and paste from the waste experience also, So there I can only refer to the directive itself. Huh?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think some of them are actually referring or how the EPR will actually effectively be implemented and working. So I think, as you said, we'll just need to see the implementing act and when it's starting to be in place, right? For some of the questions. Actually, I will take one again on this because I quite like it and I would like to hear your thought. It's how would the funding of the quaternary treatment be secure if all producers started to only put products on the market which are falling into the exemption from the EPR?
But that would mean that we don't need quaternary treatment.
Exactly.
I mean, in the ideal world, if we have, all products which are fully biodegradable, we stop the system. Huh?
Yeah.
Our analysis is that it will not happen. It's very difficult for the pharma sector, and we are conscious of that, to develop alternatives which have the same effects on public health, which is fundamental, again, and to not leading to the creation of micropollutants. So there is something, a kind of societal risk that we have to ensure and to assume, and that's why we try. That's what we try to do with this text now, to recognize the problem and to tackle it, once for all, and so that everybody can take its responsibility. For the cosmetic sector, some companies are coming to us saying that they are working on it, to really try to move towards biodegradability. And we think that this text is a kind of incentive to go in that direction. Huh? So that's my best answer for the time being. But, again, I'm prudent on that because, I think that, on the long term, it's better to tackle the issue and to not close our eyes, simply and to imagine that everything will become biodegradable in the future. No, I mean, we need to tackle this problem once for all and to offer a solution which is acceptable at societal level. Huh?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we had one where I would like also to hear your thought. I'm not sure it falls 100% under the commission, let's say umbrella, where the commission can take action, but actually the last one in a Q&A on, again, in a large city in Croatia with over 200,000 PE, the construction of a secondary treatment plant is underway, but it has not been put into operation. It will be completed in a few years. Should this plant then be upgraded to the fourth level of treatment already? Because then it's by, as said, 200,000 PE. And this raises issue related to the use of existing infrastructure, limited space, funding sources, and similar challenges.
No, I understand the question very well, and I think that probably there are few member states which are not yet fully implementing the directive. Huh? The level of implementation is relatively positive in all member states, but there are 5, 6 member states where it represents still a challenge. At the same time, it's always the case when you have a new directive. I mean, there is a transition phase. So the chance for these countries, which are a little bit late, is that they know exactly where they need to land in 2045, so they can start planning their investments accordingly. The fact that they are late will offer the opportunity to jump directly to the new requirements and to not lose time in the meantime. If I can say that. But again, yes, there are problems of space, there are problems of funding, there are problems of competence. So that is completely recognized, and that's why we have this planning, which is long-term thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's some of the feedback as well that we had from the members, and also sometimes in terms of planning, is that for them, some of them that, as you said, are a bit like, let's say, behind on old directives. They hope to basically do the jump directly and not, let's say, do secondaries and tertiary and then quaternary, but move potentially from secondary to quaternary where required, of course, directly. And that's a bit the hope for everyone. Yeah, so I think, do you see any more questions? I'm
Yes,
not
there
sure.
was
Yeah, please.
some question on the PNEC value that we were using in the feasibility study. Again, I would encourage you to have a look to the study itself because the methodology is explained. It's clear that they have used 3 criteria. So the PNEC chronic toxicity, acute toxicity, but also the quantity placed on the market. And so it's the combination of these three criteria that has led to a kind of classification of the different sectors. So the methodology is explained there, but obviously there were PNEC values which were missing, and and this is explained in the study as well. So they made hypotheses by analogy, and that is explained again, But and it is also explained that there are uncertainties around these values. Huh? So all that is recognized. Having that said, I was mentioning that the decision was a political decision, clearly in the Parliament and the Council. This, that it's absolutely clear that it was a kind of deal between the 2 legislatures on who has to pay the bill. It's one element, and then again, I was mentioning the review. I hope that we will have more and more information on the micropollutant in the wastewater, so that we can confirm these figures and adapt the directive if need be. But for the time being, on our side, the actual measurement in the water, in the rivers, are showing that pharmaceuticals remain really a problem, and that we need to tackle it. That's absolutely clear. So, and the effect on the competitiveness of European companies, I would like to mention something important. This producer responsibility scheme, as all the producer responsibility schemes, will be imposed on the manufacturer, but also the importers. So there is an equal treatment of all placing product on the market. So meaning that there is no effect in principle on competitiveness, because everybody placing something on the European market will have to participate to the system, like it's the case again in all producer responsibility schemes in the European Union. So this was two important questions as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was that one. Let me check. Okay, so we had down to, I think, 7 now on the Q&A. So I think you just mentioned, right, the one with parallel importer. So I think you just reply to that one. Yeah. We had the questions for quaternary treatment, but more the substance selection leaves a degree of freedom in which substance to select.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take it, or did you already reply to that one? I'm not sure.
Sorry?
Do you want to take that question, or did you already mention it? Because I think we touched a bit that topic earlier.
I did it already. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to say, yeah, I mean, yeah, the last comments.
Yes, but what can I say? I mean,
yeah, it's not, I would say it's not for you.
Oh, yeah.
Let me just check. I had some question on the side. And just need to reopen the document, of course.
Yes, the last before,
Yeah.
for the, I said that the water sector in the European Union is really active and competitive, and obviously having new standards with give a new push for innovation and for the competitiveness of the sector, but that's not new. I think that among the big worldwide water company, most of them, not most of them, but a lot are based in the European Union, and this is also because we have high standards, not only in wastewater, but also in drinking water. And that creates a savoir-faire in the European Union, which then allows some big companies to export their services and their technology.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think to what I can see as a chat and or Q&A, I think we replied to most of it. So we'll encourage the participants, if you still have some questions, please do it now. Otherwise, okay, now.
Yes, there was a question on the reporting of producer to their PRO.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there are some minimum things that they need to report, which are defined in the directive. There is this clause of confidentiality. And then also, but then they have classically to report, the quantity placed on the market and some elements to assess the hazardousness of their product. And then it's to the PRO to organize the organization of the confidentiality, but also the transmission of the information, so that the authorities have to check whether all producers placing product on the market are covered by a system of PRO. And it's important also, and we are sensitizing the member states to that, to organize a good enforcement of the directive by fighting free riders. So those placing product on the market which are not covered by a PRO, because it's there is an issue on competitiveness of those placing on the market things which are not covered by a system of TPR. But it's very classical again, and we have a lot of best practice coming from other system of producer responsibility, where some member states have very efficient, tracking system to identify those placing on the market products which are not covered by the EPR. So that will be part of the discussion and the dialogue that we are starting with industry and the member states.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, the other, I think, were covered, huh?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
anonymous attendees insisting, but again, I have not so much comment to do. I would encourage you to read the Parliament and Council reports. And as I was mentioning, at the beginning, there was really a discussion between the Parliament and the Council on whether we should have at all an EPR system. So, and that's part of the discussion, which is completely normal in the Parliament and in the Council.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the last three one we had were covered already. So I would say last call for our participants. Otherwise, on our side and from EWA, so Michel, so thank you very much, first of all, for taking the time today. I think you see now, because I saw you taking some notes, I think you see now some needs from guidelines and or guidelines and or guidance from our member, but not only the EWA members on how the implementation will be working, but as you said, it's starting only the implementation phase on 1st of January. So we are still early into it, and we'll all be looking and waiting for the implementing and delegating act on it to have a bit more clarity on it. I can only encourage everyone to have a look again the text. I will try to see if I will find again into our server all the documents you mentioned, so the evaluation from the commission and all of it that were published once you do the proposal, to try to add them to the text, to the email we will send to the participants on top of your presentation. So again, there will be a recording available, but again, thank you very much. I think, what do we have? I think one on secondary, or but I'm not sure. It's a secondary treatment environment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very specific question. I would like to thank you all, for your attention. I'm conscious that I have not answered to all questions because it's difficult. There was a lot of questions and sometimes they were very specific. But as I was mentioning, part of this directive, will be completed by the implementing a delegated act, and that's important. It's impossible during such a technical negotiation to cover everything and to go into technical details, and that's why we have this implementing and delegated act. So I was not, in a position today to answer to all these technical questions, but I hope that most of them will be solved in the coming implementing delegated act and in discussion in the expert group. Similar for the EPR, I try to provide my best answers, but we don't have all the answers today, and that's why we firmly in the Commission are prepared to continue the dialogue with all the stakeholders, including and particularly with industry, so to build together this system in an optimal way, and so that all the stakeholders find their way, and so that we build something which is completely cost optimal, for the benefit of everybody, And that's our firm intention in the coming weeks, months, to organize and continue this dialogue, which is not always easy, but we will continue this dialogue. That's absolutely clear. And we are not blind, neither. We are conscious of the different questions. Now we are working on it, I can tell you, and seriously. And as I was saying, this introduction will be progressive and allows time for possible adjustment if need be, in the future. But for the time being, we've based our system on the best available information around, and it's always the case that impact assessments are criticized. I was doing, I don't know, many legislation at European level. Always the hypotheses of the impact assessment are criticized, and that's absolutely normal. And the most important is to ensure a fair implementation of this text. But thanks for that, and thanks for welcoming me and for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for everything. I think it's also, I can also imagine, say for our members, we have been waiting for a long time for this weekcast, so for the update. And I think everyone come with all the question, of course, at the beginning, and everyone wants to have the answer yesterday. Otherwise, it's not funny and easy for you. But yeah, thank you very much again. So I would like to thank you, but also all the participants for all the questions you had. Do not hesitate to share with us some more questions if you have, and then we can pass them along. Again, I think it has been said in the chat again, we will share the PowerPoint for Michel, and the recording will be available. Quickly, also still on that topic, EWA upcoming events. So on the 28th of May, we'll have an EWA and Norway Water Association Spring Conference shaping the future of water management in Europe, increasing the value of water through the revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. I'm also really glad to say that Michel will be again with us for that event in Oslo. Otherwise, we'll have a couple of others free webinar before or just after this event, so feel free to check the EWA website. Again, so you will find us again the YouTube channel, LinkedIn, on social media. You have our website. Feel free to register and to sign up to our newsletter. And I will kindly ask you, once I stop the webinar, you will have a 2 to 3 minutes questionnaire just to provide you feedbacks. That would be grateful for us if you can take the time. So again, thank you very much to everyone. We finished 12 minutes in advance, which is not too bad. So Michel, thank you very much again. And I'm really sure we'll stay in touch to discuss the implementation of the text. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.